Welcome back to Sports Club. We are dressed a little funny this week, or at least
Relaxed.
these two. No, actually, I'm wearing this because it was a sad day for Yankee Nation today as 17-year veteran Jorge Posada retired.
That was yesterday.
We really
He,
starting the
No.
show
yes,
off like
yes, yes,
It's
we
this?
are.
Jorge Posada.
Yeah, Jorge
Oh,
Posada. Here we are.
jeez. Can we stop and do another take?
No, no, we can't.
I agree.
JJ, you're gonna agree with this, and I know.
This is a football show. First of all, we don't care about
Well, that
well, we
and
do, but we don't
that
talk about
and
baseball.
the
Second of all, if
Giants
we're going to talk about baseball, we don't talk about the Yankees.
27 World Championships. Thank you. But JJ, you're welcome for that one. But this has actually been my lucky Giants shirt for the playoffs. Every game that I've wore this from the season, actually, they've won. So even though I'm not picking them, I figured I would
Oh,
give
it's going to
Eli a
be your
shout out.
disappointed Giant shirts in a couple
Speaking of
weeks.
good luck, the Giants did in fact win the NFC Championship game. I'm
Oh,
going to
so we
move
are going to talk about
away from
football.
it. The Giants did win the NFC Championship game on a really, really tight overtime game with the San Francisco 49ers. Um,
Really, really
lots of
boring overtime game.
lots of stuff to talk about because there's so much that went on in the game. A lot of people leading into the game were saying Alex Smith is a completely changed quarterback. Yeah,
No,
no, he really isn't.
no,
He had a
it was
breakout last week,
it
but
was
not
not an
this week.
impressive game.
12 of 26, 196 yards. He did throw two touchdowns, which, and I'm going to get to some stats later that I'm going to have you guys compare and just see which one you would prefer better. Um, but the thing that really killed the 49ers momentum was the two
Kyle Williams.
costly fumbles from Kyle Williams.
Oh, it's got to suck to be him.
And
With the death
it's
threats and everything.
I mean, at least he didn't get on Twitter blaming God, but
and unfortunately, like he did mention, Kyle Williams did get some threats on Twitter from
I mean, but you're
avid
always gonna have
49er fans,
psycho
if you
fans who
really
do
want to
this
say it.
stuff.
Peyton Manning, on the other hand, did have an outstanding game, a 32 of 58.
Peyton?
Peyton did.
Excuse me.
Yes. I was like, I missed that one.
Peyton's been in the news all day today. I've got him on my mind.
Congratulations, Peyton, on your new commercial. By the way, it's hilarious.
Man's got to work.
Eli,
Exactly.
32 of 58, 316
Mm.
yards. Are we talking, Mile High Messiah again with
No.
the 316?
Nope.
Two touchdowns.
Not at all. He's
Um,
not here.
But if you look at it, they had 20 first downs. The Giants had 20 first downs in the entire game. 17 through the air, 3 on the ground, which means that Bradshaw and just mine went blank. Um, did not have a good game. I mean, Bradshaw actually led the Giants with 74 rushing yards, but it's reasonable, especially with his 316 passing yards. On the other hand, and I'm going to throw this out to you. Would you rather have a receiver with 10 receptions, 142 yards, and no touchdowns?
Hold on, let me think about that. 10 receptions.
10 receptions,
142
142
now, to
yards.
be fair, Matt's like me and he's a Bucks fan. We don't get a lot of big yardage out of our receivers, but just
We don't
hypothetically.
get much out of anybody.
Or 3 receptions, 112 yards for 2 touchdowns.
The 2 touchdowns.
I like the
Any
points on
day.
the board.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's 2 catches for 2 yards
Yeah.
and 2 touchdowns. It counts.
It's 2
I
touchdowns.
agree. And unfortunately, that came in a losing cause. Vernon Davis had an outstanding game, 112 yards, 2 touchdowns.
2 personal fouls that I remember, at least 2 15-yard
Yeah, two
penalties on him.
15-yard penalties.
he
one
seems
for
to-
excessive celebration,
He
and
seems
the
to
other
be
was a
back
personal
for
foul.
from his. It seemed like he had turned a leaf and that he was actually going to be this positive role model. He went right back to the thug he used to be.
A couple things that really stuck out in the stat book, if you really look into it. The Niners were 1 for 13 on third downs. That is just almost inexcusable if you want an offense to actually stand. And it stood out. I mean, you're not an NFC Championship team if you go 1 for 13 on third downs. They're also
Yeah.
0-1 on the red zone, which kind of was terrible. Final score ended up being 2017. Lawrence Tynes actually kicked a field goal to win the game for the second time to get into the Super Bowl in 4 years. So it's a big game. Manning had an outstanding game. I don't know what more to say.
Uh, I don't.
I think we could say that Eli Manning could be considered an elite quarterback, like he said he was, because even if that's the
He's had a
greatest game
great season.
if that's the greatest game he's played this entire year, that would be a good end
We'll
note.
talk again after the Super Bowl.
I agree. Moving on to the AFC Championship game, Ravens faced off against Patriots. Gave the Patriots everything they had.
Yep.
They really did.
Which
They
is gonna bring 'em
outgained
other
the
points.
Patriots. They won the turnover battle. They won time of possession. Normally, when you take those three, when you look at the stat book, 9 times out of 10, 10 games that you look at, if you look at those three stats, whoever won those typically wins the game.
Yep. But just because you grow a handlebar mustache does not mean you're on
What
Tom
was
Brady's
going on with
wavy.
that? I thought maybe he just
He
didn't
was,
shower
I
today
don't
or
just
something.
channeling his inner Hulk Hogan, trying to get some old school Hulkamaniacs.
He needed some steroids.
I
in.
mean,
The really weird thing, Joe Flacco and Tom Brady actually had the same stats, 22 of 36. Ridiculous. Flacco had 306 yards passing. Brady had 239. So Flacco actually beat
well,
Brady,
if I'd have
which is
told you,
another thing.
Flacco also had 2 touchdowns to Brady's 0.
I was
Zero.
about to say, if I told you last week that Brady was going to have no touchdowns and 2 interceptions after the game, who was going to win?
Yeah, I
I
wouldn't.
mean, everyone would
And
have
the
said
Ravens had probably 5 legitimate shots to win this game.
Ray
Yeah.
Rice had 21 carries for
And
67
another
yards.
legitimate shot to take it to overtime.
Exactly.
21 carries for 67 yards for Ray Rice when he's been averaging the last 3 times against the Patriots 147 yards. So when you
They
completely
shut
cut
Ray
that
Rice
in
down.
half,
Yeah.
and let's be real, Ray Rice is their offense.
Well,
It's true. I
And
mean,
now-
but did Flacco not step up and prove that he could be a next level quarterback? He's just not there yet.
Yes. And Quan Bolden actually had 101 yards. Lee Evans actually had it on his fingertips,
Yep.
and I'm not going to say dropped it because the defensive player made an outstanding play
he
to
swatted
knock it out of.
It would have been a catch had it not. It was a heads-up defensive play.
Gronkowski had 5 receptions, 87 yards. Another big game for
Was
the
hurt,
future,
will be
in my
back.
opinion, future Hall of Fame. The kid's just that good, guys. I'm going to say it after 2 years. He's just that good.
I mean, he can come out of the backfield. He can come from everywhere. I mean, there's no telling where this guy's going to come from.
But we're looking at a Patriots New York Giants rematch of the Super Bowl 42. We will hit this next week after the Pro Bowl. It's another
The
big
what?
thing. It's a week that people typically
Oh,
when
that,
they want
the
football,
the
they
paid
can watch it
Hawaiian
if they really want.
All-Star Fest.
Yeah,
yes,
that one.
That one, right. By the way, the NFC is going to probably lose this, even though they were the stronger league this year.
I mean, Pro Bowl doesn't even matter.
I mean, they do have Drew Brees, I believe, going, which is going to help them out a lot. But they also have Cam Newton, so I don't see the NFC winning
Yeah.
this.
Moving on. What else do we got to talk about tonight?
We do need to talk about the passing of Joe Paterno, a college and coaching. I'm not going to even say college, coaching legend, because the guy is just that good. Let's just put it into perspective, guys. The guy's been head coach at Penn State for 46 years. An assistant since what 1950, I believe.
Something like that.
He recruited Coach Ditka out of high school. Just to put some perspective into it, this is how long this guy has been coaching. And I actually heard this on the radio earlier, and I have to thank Colin Coward for it, but it's true. He's not really coaching. He's teaching these students. This is a teaching league, especially in college. You need to learn. He's teaching.
He's developing players.
This is an outstanding human being, aside from what's happened in the past 365 days. This is an outstanding human being.
Absolutely.
Will be missed in the Big Ten, especially being an Ohio State fan. He will be missed. Um, you know, aside from how many times they beat us.
As a Michigan fan, they killed us a lot of times too.
The coaching search continues, though, on the NFL side. A lot of coaches have been named. Let's just start with the defensive and offensive coordinator side. Offensive coordinator for Falcons have been named for Dirk Cutter, the
Yep.
old offensive coordinator for Jacksonville.
Yep.
Mike Nolan, who was the defensive coordinator for Miami the past 2 years, and I believe for 4 years prior to that, he was the DC for 49ers, has been named DC for the Falcons. One really good hire, in my opinion, and one hire that I'm gonna have to look at a little bit later.
Let's discuss which one's which.
Let's talk about Dirk first because
Okay.
he's coming from Jacksonville, which usually has a pretty good offense. But the last 2 major quarterbacks he's had
I've been
were really fast scrambler quarterbacks. What
And
is
they
that going
don't
to do
have
for
that
Matt Ryan,
now.
who does not run very well?
But from every report that I've heard, he has been a very screen happy quarterback or offensive coordinator, which is needed with
Okay, well
Jaquiz Rogers
that
in the backfield.
basically that means Norwood and Rogers are going to get more
Yep.
Yeah.
touches because Michael Turner can't catch coming out of the
Yeah.
Well,
backfield.
especially since Michael Turner is a free agent going into the season, so
Which
that's
would make
another
it-
thing.
make
To,
things
Fans, don't
very
worry.
interesting.
I'm pretty sure he'd come back.
Well,
on the defensive side, Mike Nolan has spent 14 years as the offensive coordinator. 7 of them being 3-4 defense, 7 of them being 4-3
so
defense.
he can do anything.
He has come in and said, "Look, I'm not going to change this around. The Falcons are a 4-3 defense. I'm not changing it."
Yeah, they're not going to a 5-2 or nothing. It's just not going to happen.
I think it's a really good hire in my opinion for Mike Nolan. Dirk Cutter, like I said, I'll see when I believe it.
Yeah.
Moving on, the Colts have actually looked into hiring their game day video replay
First of all, we've got to give
assistant.
props to Bryce, who called this last week
Bryce did call this.
Bryce called this
before-
about 5
before
days before it
anybody
happened.
in the world had any thought of this guy.
Actually,
he
it
was
was
all
about
over
7 days ago. It was right before we filmed one of the shows.
He was
went through his
all
conspiracy
over
theory.
this, and sure enough, he's looking like the man who knows all right now. Go ahead and say it.
I think it'd be a good hire for the Colts. However,
Of course you would.
it's because I actually, aside from the controversy that they had, I think he's an outstanding head football
Well,
coach.
they did run a pro offense at Ohio State,
Yes, they did.
right?
And like
And-
Bryce said, who better to coach up a first-year NFL quarterback coming out of college than a person who spent the last 8 years, minus this past year,
Was
coaching college quarterbacks?
Well, that's a good point.
Yep. So Jim Tressel could be headed to the Colts.
We
which,
shall see.
which I mean,
The sweater
Jim Tressel
vest.
is a pro style, and yeah, he will be
The
bringing the
sweater vest
vest.
turns blue. We'll see.
This just in, though, the Broncos, or excuse me, the Raiders have hired a head coach, and it's going to be Broncos defensive coordinator Dennis Allen. And
Interesting.
I was
I don't-
wondering if Oakland was going to decide or not.
well,
it's
they
the
could say
first
the same
time
thing
in
about us.
years
Yeah.
since the John Madden era that Raiders have actually hired a defensive-minded head
Defensive-minded
coach.
I think this could be work wonders.
I do too, because considering what they've got to look at, I think their offense is actually can look pretty good considering that they've got Carson Palmer now under a full year. They will have McFadden back healthy. I think
They
their
got some
offense is
weapons over
fine.
there.
They do.
Their defense, however, is the one thing that actually didn't keep them in the games, and I think that's one thing that I think hiring a defensive-minded head coach is going to be smart. Um, the Rams.
The
Okay,
Rams, yeah.
sorry, I'm looking over at Jeremy's notes and trying to think.
There's
What's
so
going
many
on?
sets of notes over here right now. It's difficult. To
You
figure
can
out where
go
we're
with the
going.
Rams real quick.
Did they do something? 'Cause I don't even know why they're.
I think the Rams actually
The
hired
Rams
Brian
Brian
Schottenheimer
Schottenheimer
as
as
their
their
offensive
offensive coordinator.
which is smart. Which is smart for the Rams, just
Yeah.
considering they've got a young Sam Bradford that is still developing into this league. He looked pretty solid coming out. Then last year he kind of took a step back. A lot of it was
Yeah.
health issues, but
He pulled a Matt Stafford. I mean, Matt Stafford is one of the better quarterbacks, and not just because he came from around here, but I mean, he seriously is a solid quarterback. And we saw this year when he's healthy what he can do.
Yep.
I think Sam Bradford, once he's
Has
healthy,
that potential.
is going to have that potential. He
Definitely.
has a lot of weapons to throw to over there.
and former head coach of the
Speaking
St.
of the
Louis
Rams,
is moving to defensive coordinator for the Saints.
that's actually going to work out well,
That's-
I believe.
But I say that's pretty scary because the Saints
Yeah.
are getting more help.
Defensive coach, and we see sometimes where a defensive coach doesn't always make a great head coach, but when they move back to their coordinator comfort zone, they just explode, and that's what I'm afraid of.
But moving on to another head coaching vacancy that is still yet to be filled. Going into this weekend, I actually got text messages late at night and then first thing in the morning conflicting.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Thanks for that, ESPN. I was trying to sleep.
One was telling me Chip Kelly is looking to be the new head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then the very next day, first thing in the
Within
morning,
hours,
they're telling me, oh, he's decided to go back to Oregon. Being a Bucks fan, is that a good thing or a bad thing for the Bucks?
I love
well,
it.
I think it's a good thing
I
that
love it.
he's staying, but I don't like how they went about how he decided to go about doing
Like
it.
the
you know?
Oregon job's better than the Bucks.
Well-
I'm not necessarily for sure. For him, it is.
Yeah.
But it would have been a better opportunity to coach one of his former players and possibly one of his other former players as they come out of the draft, and to actually prove that college coaches can take pro to a different level.
But I would rather have had him than Mike Sherman.
Good point.
So
Um, moving on to the final coaching vacancy that or coaching issue that we have. Bruce Arians, the offensive coordinator for the past 5 years at Pittsburgh, has officially retired from coaching.
retired in quotations.
That's
Yeah.
what the Pittsburgh said.
But coming out today, it's been announced that or Arians has come out and said, look, I was kind of forced out. I mean,
And it happens. I mean, even
It does.
especially in college, they force people out, but in the pros, it gets kind of dusted under the rug a little bit. This kind of stuff happens all the time. Either if you get older or if your system's outdated, they find better things to do with you.
and especially since Big Ben has been hurt a lot more in the past couple of years than he has when he first started his career, I think it's probably a good thing. Moving on to next week, I know a lot of us we really shouldn't even talk about it because most of you guys won't even watch it. To be honest,
Yeah.
I probably won't even watch it. I'll probably watch the NHL All Star game before I watch this. But the Pro Bowl is this weekend.
We'll probably miss that too.
Forgot that was this weekend, didn't
No,
you?
I knew it.
The Pro Bowl is this weekend. A lot of big names, but like I said, we're just going to touch on it and say it's this weekend, so pay attention.
Also, at the same time spot, I believe Bryce's favorite soccer team, the Silly Nannies, are probably playing. So we might actually flip over to that one.
But moving on to the following week after that, we're going to be hitting
Yep.
hard and heavy on the Super Bowl. We're going to probably dissect it as well as we did last year because I think last year was an outstanding Super Bowl. And I think this year, with a full force with the four of us here, I think a lot of us it's going to be a really, really good
Yeah,
show
actually,
to show up next
between
week.
us and the writers and creators here, we have a few different ideas we're throwing out about different ways to tackle this. You guys will have to tune in to see which direction we go with that.
Definitely. Gonna
But
make it interesting.
real quick, let me throw this out since Bryce isn't here. It's not as colorful. But what's a I guess a better story going into the Super Bowl? Or what's the bigger issue? If Eli wins ring number 2, is he the better Manning? Or if Brady wins number 4, is he the best ever?
Brady best ever. And
And
this is not discrediting Manning. It's not.
exactly, I'm not
Yeah.
taking away from anything. But
I
if Brady
mean,
has 4 rings,
he's the best ever.
is he the best
Period.
ever? And
Ever.
then if Eli were to pull off this win and have 2 rings, that's one more than
He's
Peyton.
clearly the
Is he
best.
the best? Because
I
he's
mean,
played less
well, of course
years,
you
he
gotta
has
think he
bigger
is.
numbers with a less awesome team.
Yeah.
The Giants are up and down every year.
If Brady wins, he will pass Joe Montana as the all-time leading quarterback in postseason victories.
Yep.
He will
Which is
probably
4th ring.
he will probably also pass. If I'm not mistaken, I
Bradshaw
saw
has
this
3 or does he have
stat.
4?
I saw this stat earlier. He will also pass either Joe Montana or Brett Favre for the most completions.
Yeah.
Because I think he only needs 12. He's only 343 yards away from the most passing yards in postseason history,
See, and this
which could be
this is
That's-
postseason.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
which
talking
misses-
about when
and,
it when it
'cause
matters
he's not
the
done.
most.
He's
and
not
this
retiring
is
after
No.
this year.
15,000 yards,
Yeah.
passing yards.
I
So
mean,
in postseason, a
we're
lot of quarterbacks would love 15,000 passing yards.
Not to
it's
mention that he had 6 this year
yeah.
in the regular season.
I mean, it's easy to get caught up in statistics, but I mean, when you really break it down, there's no question that we might be watching one of the best to ever pick up a football.
And he was a sixth-round draft pick.
99
199
199.
Yep. And hadn't let the rest of the world forget it since.
So that shows how pointless the draft is. So tune in for our draft show.
But that's it for the three of us. Unfortunately, Bryce couldn't make it this week, but we'll see you guys next week for our Super Bowl preview show. I'm Billy. This has been Jeremy and Matt. It's been Sports Club, guys.